Yes, okay. I mean, this is what you have to do. When you work a piece like this, put the things in. We don't have to do all the rest of it. It's more or less the same. We have, okay.
The repetitions.
The simple repetition.
Yeah.
Sonata forms like
Yeah.
big pieces.
I would make the repetition. I would make the repetition. These, in a way, these are still A forms. There's very little development. But, and it was perfectly clear that they wanted this, the movement was much longer than it is if you just play without repetition. It's much too short. This business of repetition, the first half, everybody always does in a sonata form, at least many people do. But nobody virtually ever does the repeat if it's written, even much later than this, if it's written for the development and the recapitulation. But that's totally wrong. When that's written, the composer has given it very careful thought. Look at Beethoven. He writes in the quartet, opus 59, number 2, the E minor quartet, you know that? Bum, bum, long first movement. First half, repeated. Then comes a huge development section and a huge recapitulation. And at the end of the recapitulation, he has a retransition of about 6 measures that remodulates to repeat the entire development and recapitulation. And after that, there is the coda. Now, that huge part of the second half makes this a movement that's of symphonic proportions, like first movement of the Eroica. And very few people do that. But then he writes another quartet in the opus 59 series, in which there is no repeat. And he writes opus 95, which is short, and there is not even a double bar. So he knew exactly what he was doing. In one piece, he decides this shape to use this shape. In another piece, he decides to use a different, and he thought about it very carefully. It was not just that he was following a tradition by any means. And it's only laziness on the part of the performers who don't do this. And that's really violating the intent of the composer. You might as well change the notes. There are 2 things in Beethoven that you have to follow: his tempi, and of course his dynamic markings and the notes and everything, and his repeat marks. And also in Mozart. Now Mozart writes a symphony like the Hafner Symphony, the 35th Symphony, there's no repeat in the first movement. Then he writes last movement of the Jupiter, the last symphony he wrote, has both halves repeated. Also the second half with all this counterpoint of the do, do, di, do, ba, 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 di. All these counterpoints repeated. And it's amazing what this does when you hear it the second time. It changes the piece totally. It's exciting to hear it the second time. This whole contrapuntal complexity. It changes totally the proportions. You know, you must do that which the composer writes. Now, sometimes, okay, if you are playing for an audience and you know that's totally disinterested, sometimes you make pragmatic decision not to do this. But be aware that you are violating the piece. When you play it in a concert, do the repeats. And don't worry about if the piece gets longer. So, if people want to be in a hurry, let them leave. That's not your concern. It's, you know, Gustav Mahler was the director of the Vienna State Opera as a conductor. And he did the Wagner, the Ring of the Nibelung, you know, 4 evenings, huge, long operas. And he did not permit any of the cuts that are always made. These operas are almost never presented the way Wagner wrote them, because everybody thinks, oh, they're too long. For whom? Not for Wagner. He wrote it. He did it, and everybody simply thought it was just fabulous. And then Mahler had to leave. There was such intrigue in Vienna, terrible. And he went to America. So his successor was Felix von Weingartner. A very good musician. Well, the first thing he did is to reinstate all the cuts in the Ring, which made it significantly shorter. And the reason given by the Office of the Vienna State Opera for this is out of consideration for the honored public so that they can get the last tram to go home. In all seriousness, that is a consideration, to cut a piece of music to its bones so that the people can get comfortably home, the tram. I would have arranged with the city of Vienna to have a tram after the Ring performances when the performance is finished. That should be easy. And pay the extra money you need to the conductor and the ticket collector. But no, there are always reasons that have nothing to do with the music that are given for changing it, for doing violence to the music, and really hurting the music as far as I'm concerned. And one of the things is the repeats. People will always tell you, but it's too long. For whom? Evidently not for the composer.
For example, in baroque style, they used to play variations or ornamentations.
Yes.
In classical music, they did? Or?
They did. I mean, Mozart, I guarantee you, never played the recapitulation in a piano concerto or in a sonata the same way that it is written. They all made interpolations, they made new embellishments, variations of the thing. This is a very dangerous style. We are not Mozart, and for us to do this, but I think within a certain judicious way, this is absolutely stylistically necessary, just as it is in the Baroque. You embellished in a Handel sonata, you don't play it as, just the notes. The notes are the skeleton over which then you put all kinds of things. You have to study what this was done. And that is why the study of Baroque music and performance practice is a really important study. And in Basel, where I teach at the academy, there is a separate school, the Basel, the Escuela Cantorum Basiliensis. It's only for old music, a separate school, which has all the world's greatest experts on performance practice teaching there, instrumentalists and theoreticians, and they study all the ways that these things are read. That's very important. And sometimes you get somebody who does this well. There is a recording of a Mozart piano concerto that I have with the Vienna Orchestra with Friedrich Gulda, a pianist. He's dead now, but he was a phenomenal pianist. And he plays a solo, and he puts in all kinds of things. He invents, already in the first tutti, he puts little trills in there, he's having a good time. It is so funny. It is so wonderful to hear this perform. It is so vivacious. If it is what Mozart would have done, but it's in that kind of a spirit. Mozart was a very funny guy. He loved a joke. He conducted performance of the Magic Flute, practically his last opera. Titus actually was later. It was a comic opera, right? For the people who like to go today to operettas or musicals, they went to this opera because it had all kinds of funny things in it, dialogue and a birdman. You know the Magic Flute? Okay, fine. And so Mozart, for this figure of this Papageno, who has these simple songs, And there is the clavichord. It's a cymbalon, sort of a piano keyboard instruments that has like with little bells, you know. And Mozart played that himself. He conducted the performance, and then he sat down at this instrument when it comes to this, and he played that part. And he started improvising. And the man who had commissioned him to write the opera, Schikaneder, was singing the part of Papageno himself. He was the director of the theater. He had commissioned Mozart to write the opera, and that was his great show, and the audience loved him. And Mozart starts improvising, and he got lost. And Mozart thought that was so funny. And he could have killed him. And the audience was having a roaring time, laughing that their big hero gets lost on the stage. And Mozart just keeps improvising, making things that are never written before. And he didn't know what to do. This is the kind of character Mozart was. He loved a practical joke. He was a really funny guy. And so you have to imagine, he would have loved it if people did things with his music. The only thing he didn't like is this kind of dead serious, the way it is played today, as if this was a museum piece. You can stand there and say, oh, come on, this was music written for the day. And if you wanted something else, he'd write you another piece for tomorrow. A violinist comes to Salzburg to play one of the violin concerti, the A major, and he says to Mozart, you know, I don't like the second movement. Mozart, oh, you don't? I'll write you a new one. And he did. There are alternate movements for that piece. You know, this is the kind, music was very much a matter of the day. It wasn't so, and you took an aria from a mass and put it into a comic opera, and you took an overture from this thing and put it there, and you know, look at what Rossini does. He transposes things from one up. They all did that. And Bach does that. He takes the and puts it into a cantata to be sung in the church. Have you ever heard that? Oh, it's wonderful. You all of a sudden you sit there and you hear you think somebody, what they're playing? My violin, E major partita. Hey! But this was common. And we take everything so deadly serious. That's why it's a very good question you asked. Yes, they all did that. But one has to be careful with it.
No, they share what we can do is change the dynamics.
Yes, you must.
Yeah.
And you can even add some you can even add some embellishments if you're careful. I wouldn't play exactly the same repetition. At the recapitulation, I would maybe add a trillion there. You know? No, da 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 da, ba da da da, ba da da da. Perfectly all right. In fact, good. Always surprise the audience. That's why Beethoven loved subitus. And Haydn, the so-called surprise symphony. Bum, 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 you know, bah! But that's exactly, it's funny. And people are afraid of that. That's why I think one should play with the utmost of contrast, not make everything smooth. And that's, for me, is too much what is being done here. People are afraid of contrast. The subito fortis are not really fortis. Oh no, il faut pas épater le bourgeois. I think you should épater le bourgeois all the time. Kick him. Okay.